Okay, thank you. Nice to see so many of you. And if you can't hear to the back, if I'm kind of going down with the voice, please yell immediately so that I can speak up, because the microphone is only for the recording of the session. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Sami Makkonen. I'm from Digia, Finland. I'm working in the R&D as a product manager. Lately I have been working, for example, with the charts component that we have created, and then also I have been working with the cloud related activities that we have been working inside the Digia. And I'm going to tell you in this presentation about these activities that we have been doing. The content is so that when people talk about cloud, different people mean different things. So as we have seen already in this morning in the keynote presentation, the kind of understanding of what are the cloud services is really vague. So basically, I'm going to define what I am talking today. So of course, other stuff are also cloud services, but I'm limiting this to a certain area of the cloud services. And of course, the perspective is always how you can use the cloud services from a Qt perspective, how you can create an application that uses the cloud services. And then I'm going to present two activities, the Cloud API for Qt that we have been doing, and then I'm going to tell you about the service backend solution that we have been doing inside Digia, and it's called Ingenio. Actually quite new thing also in Digia. We are having an annual customer survey for the commercial licensees of Qt. And one of the questions this year was about related to the cloud services. What kind of services people are thinking that they might be using, or what they are using, and what kind of service providers they use. So there seems to be a lot of kind of uncertainty about the future at the moment. So people are not using the cloud services, but in many industries there's a lot of interest towards the cloud services. And people are kind of figuring out what to do still. And if we look at the answers, what are the most common things? I guess it's basically just storing files to the cloud. Some are planning on using databases in the cloud. And of course, there are some cases where you, for example, use the computing in the cloud so that you buy more computing power from the cloud. One thing that was also popping up quite frequently was the security. So that people are wondering if it's secure to store the data to the cloud, and if there's a need for setting up some kind of encryption. And of course, many see that, okay, the kind of cloud functionality and the APIs are the good thing, but they cannot actually store the data to some servers that they don't know the location. So people are planning on setting up internal clouds, private clouds inside the company network. But in a sense, the cloud kind of harmonizes the APIs in many cases in a way that you can use it also in the company internal network using the same kind of APIs, and of course you can move some of the functionality to a public cloud or hybrid cloud if that situation comes. Then there was some mentions about Qt not having APIs for the cloud services, and actually there was one comment that's below in the slide that people have been using some other languages because of there isn't any APIs available for Qt. And if we are looking what kind of service models there are, and this is kind of the foundation of the presentation. So these are the terms that I am referring, and these are the services that I am referring. The topmost service is the software as a service. So, for example, email clients using the CRM, Salesforce from the cloud. There's a Basecamp project management tool, and of course the Google applications and Office applications that are provided through the cloud. And in this level, you usually also have an API. Actually, there was a presentation earlier about the Google APIs, so that you can access the data also from this level, these applications, through a certain API, so that you can manipulate the data or import, for example, data to the Salesforce through the Salesforce API. Then one of the kind of hot topics in the cloud area currently is the backend as a service. And usually these are coming from the mobile application development space. And usually they are actually referred as mobile backend as a service kind of solutions. And there's a lot of new companies operating in this area. For example, I think Parse is quite successful in that area. And the idea is that you have a predefined functionality in the back end. And basically it's, of course, around the data storage and, for example, storing files and data related to the files. For example, if you have pictures uploaded to the cloud, then the metadata is stored to a storage service. And then there usually are services like push notification or social media integration, so that you can easily hook up that kind of functionality to your application without actually programming anything, those. But of course, in this level, the kind of the things that you can customize or what kind of functionality you can implement in the back-end side are limited. So you get a kind of fixed functionality. Of course, some provide some means of providing also additional functionality, for example, using JavaScript, so that you can have actually server-side JavaScript implementation as part of that. But usually it's more limited than in the lower levels of the cloud services. Then there's the platform as a service, so that you have a set of functionality. For example, you have the databases and you have APIs for accessing those. So basically it's a kind of solution stack, and usually it defines also the kind of application development, the server-side application development environment as well. Then the lowest level is, of course, buying computing time. So basically buy a virtual server, install your operating system, what you want, and then install the needed software in the virtual server. And basically what you do is define, for example, the ports that are open, and then you can do also load balancing. So, and of course you can use also geographical distribution of the servers. Okay, so how to utilize the cloud from the Qt perspective? Of course, if you take the lowest level, so the infrastructure, um, you can buy a virtual machine and install Qt and run applications. But of course, you have to implement APIs yourself to the application so that you can interface, exchange data. Of course, in some cases, if it's very computing intensive stuff, you can actually just use the cloud computing, the number crunching, do some simulations or something like that. Then you can do the load balancing, you can distribute it to different areas of the globe. But that's the kind of the basic level of what you can do and suits for some cases. Of course, you can host the databases so that you buy the virtual machines with the databases installed and use those. There might be some limitations what you can do, for example, for security reasons. But some cases this is a viable option. Then of course you can use file services. Actually, I think many are using Dropbox to storing files, exchanging files. So you have to integrate that functionality to the Qt application. Create some kind of API for accessing the data. And many of the services provide actually currently RESTful APIs. And if we look at the Qt as a software stack, actually the situation is quite good regarding to the REST APIs. You have a good base layer for network connectivity. You have the XML parsing, and actually it seems that many of the new services are built on top of JSON, and JSON's parsing has been available for a while through the script module, and now it's available as a separate functionality in the Qt core as well, as actually Lars mentioned this morning. Some of the services use SOAP-based web services. In Qt itself, there is no support for SOAP currently, and but there are available, for example, from KDAP. There's a commercial solution, and there are actually also some open source solutions available. So in a sense, the situation is quite good, and you can do a lot. Okay, let's look at the first research initiative that we created regarding to the cloud. So this was basically related to the comment in the survey, so that there would be an API, for example, for the Amazon Web Services, and a common API that hides the complexity of the web services and using them. And what we did, we launched a research project with the University of Jyväskylä, so that we asked them to figure out whether it's possible to create a kind of common API for accessing all of these services. And but it wasn't really a mandatory requirement to have one common API that enables kind of easy switching of the providers as well. Because in most cases, if you look at the different languages and the APIs, they are usually kind of these toolkit-based approaches. So that you have, for example, Amazon toolkit, Amazon API implementation, and then you have a separate implementation for Microsoft Azure. But we thought that, okay, let's look at the kind of Qt way of doing things, having a common API that hides the implementation behind. And basically what they have been doing is a kind of hybrid. So it's a common API, but some parts are actually service specific, of course. And we selected the Amazon Web Services and the Microsoft Azure as the first ones to try out. And then from the service perspective, we selected the file storing services, and the table storage was the second. And if we look at the use case, for example, getting a file from Amazon Web Services, the application creates the Amazon connection, so it's a Q Cloud connection class, which then creates the Amazon connection. And basically you just request the buckets, so which is basically the directories in the cloud, and you get a list of Q strings as a return, and then you can ask for a certain value inside the bucket. And the same mechanism, of course, is for the Microsoft Azure. So quite simple API which handles the authentication to the service and also the parsing and encoding the traffic between the application and the service. And the status of this research project is that there is a research prototype existing. Basic use cases for the file service is available for the Azure and Amazon. There are test cases and example applications, so it's basically a FTP client kind of test application. But the most advanced use cases, for example, synchronization, automatic synchronization between the cloud service and the client application, is not implemented yet. And also for the table storage, there is some implementation existing, but it's not very far yet. This implementation requires Qt 5 because the authentication for the cloud services, both Amazon and Azure, requires HMAC SHA-256 implementation, and the Qt4 cryptographic hash class defines only SHA-1. So basically that has been added to the Qt5. And the HMAC implementation is built on top of the SHA-256 implementation in the API itself. And the idea is that we will be putting this implementation that we have to the Qt project playground so that we can continue the development in the playground. And of course, if you are interested actually using the API, testing the API, giving feedback, or actually doing also some development in that area, because of course the resources in this project are really limited. Basically it's one master's thesis worker, so he's creating a master's thesis of this API, so that actually doesn't get us so far, but there is some implementation already available. And I'm really interested in hearing if you are interested of this kind of API implementation and interested in testing. So please follow the Qt project mailing list. We have initiated the discussion about adding this to the playground, so it should be there quite soon. and also, of course, mailing me about the interest that you have, and testing. So, and the second, the back-end as a service part. As I said, we have been developing in Digia a service called Ingenio, and we are going to a beta phase quite soon. So the implementation is in quite good shape. And of course, we have been looking this issue from the perspective of Qt. But also we have been looking at other platforms as well, so that accessing that from other environments as well. So it's not Qt only thing, but of course the focus has been quite a lot in the Qt side. So what is the backend as a service, or Ingenio specifically? Essentially, it's a seamless data storage, which means that you don't have to define the data structure in the server side. You don't have to fix it when you are doing the implementation. And actually, you can do really flexible addition of properties in the database with the JSON REST API. And actually, it goes so that during the development, you just store new data to the server, and the server figures out magically that, okay, now there's a new property that you need, and creates the needed data storage for the properties. So it's really, really flexible. And of course, it's not only the automatic generation of the schema, but of course you can define also some rules in the data schema. For example, some dependencies between different object types. You can define some of the properties mandatory. So it's a really flexible system, and you can use it really easily. I'm actually going to show you an application example where we create a backend in just a couple of minutes. And how you access the database is, of course, through the REST API, accessing the objects, accessing the schemas, and actually accessing also the user tables, for example. But then there's also a dashboard, a web-based user interface that you can, for example, define these kind of links between the data objects and the validation criteria. But let's look at that in more detail as well. And actually, this is one of the cool features of Ingenio, so that it supports the development life cycle for the application. So that when we create an account for the developer, and then we create the applications, so there can be several applications, and each of these applications have different environments for development, and then there's an environment for testing and staging and the production, so that it takes care of the lifecycle management of the API. And you can do simultaneously, you run one version of your product in a production environment, and then you do the development of the next version in the development environment. And there are some differences in these environments. For example, what you can do. For example, in the development environment, you can modify the schema on the fly by using the API. But actually in the production environment, it's kind of fixed. of course, you don't define new properties when the application is out in the field. And also we are developing the kind of the management between the environments and the data migration paths for this functionality. The technical architecture is such that it's running in the Amazon servers, but it's not tied to Amazon otherwise than the load balancer. So it's using the Amazon load balancing functionality. But in the lower levels, for example, the JSON document store we are using the MongoDB as a database solution. The application servers are running on top of Nginx and Ruby on Rails. And of course, on top of this, basically what is showing outside is the REST API. And actually setting up this kind of environment requires quite a lot of deep technical knowledge about these different technologies, and also, for example, configuring the load balancer so that it takes the load and distributes it and automatically scales up the computing resources when needed is actually quite tricky thing to do. And actually there isn't that many people that can, for example, define the MongoDB instances in correct way so that it fits to the load balancing scenario. The idea is that we provide the client-side API, so the API function API implementation in the client side, so that you can easily use that from the application. A bit similar thing as the cloud API. And the idea is that, well, basically we have been doing the iOS API as the kind of first API, and the Qt has been following. And the others we haven't yet touched, in a sense that because the server-side implementation and the API implementation has been ongoing, so the API hasn't been fixed yet. But actually now we've had quite stable API for a while already. And now we are putting more focus on, for example, Android API development in quite near future. Okay, so let's have a short demo what you can do with Ingenio. I have a use case, a great application, which is a classical to-do application. So you have the possibility to enter new items. You have possibility to mark those as completed. And you have possibility to delete items. And now the idea is that, okay, let's store the data to the cloud. And what is needed? We have created a plugin for the Qt Creator so that you can actually access the dashboard directly from the Qt Creator. So that, okay, we haven't used the service before. Let's create a new account, which we need email address. Let's see if the network is working okay. Okay, great. It's working quite nicely actually. So this is the first situation. You don't have any applications. You have just an account. So let's create a new application. to do. Okay, now we have the development, and actually testing environment is linked to the development environment. So there is a development and testing as well. And then there's the staging and production. And if we go and look the development environment, there's the access key for the client, which is needed later. Then there's two schemas. And actually this is something that the Ingenio creates automatically, so that it assumes that there are different users for the application. So it creates the users and user groups. This is the one of the key features and functionalities in Ingenio. You have quite good possibilities to create, for example, the access control lists for the users. So that, for example, if you want to define rules that, okay, everyone can see everyone's data, but they can only modify their own data. These kind of rules can be really easily defined in the dashboard. And for that functionality, it creates the schemas for the users. Then if we go and look at the objects, there is no objects because there's no kind of data related schema at the moment. But actually that's the only thing that you need in order to create the backend for your application. You don't have to define the data structures at this point. You can do that when you are developing the application. So basically the only thing that I need to take here is the client-side key. Let's copy that one. Okay. This application, what I'm using, creating, is actually a single user application. But yeah, you have to define the users either by in the application, so that, for example, in the application you ask for a username and a password. So you don't have to actually do that if the application is such that the users can create the accounts for themselves. Of course, in some cases it's not allowed to create your own account, but it's created by some other means. For example, you have a management application where you add the users to the system. So this was the to-do application project, and actually I've already included the Ingenio API for the project. And the functionality is so that we are creating an empty list model in the application. So those of you who have been developing with Qt Quick, this is the kind of basic functionality to show data, for example, in the list views in the application. And the data is defined for the list model when you append data to the list model, so that we define here that, okay, there's a title, which is text coming from the text box, and then there's the completed flag, which is manipulated by clicking the text in the list. So it toggles the value of the completed tag. But now it isn't storing the data anywhere, so it's only runtime data. When the application closes, the data is vanished. But let's add the Ingenio API. And then we have to define the API key. And where we can do this is in the component on load. So sorry, on completed, where we can define that, okay, Ingenio API key. and copy paste the key to the API key property. And the other thing that we need to define is the name for the schema. So basically this is, you can think this as like a database table name for the backend. So let's use a to-do for this. Okay, I'm missing here. So this is the setup for the server side. And how to create the kind of database tables, if you want to think of it like that, is actually the same way as you create it in the model. So basically, instead of appending the model, we use the Ingenio append functionality. And now actually the API is designed so that it takes care also the model handling. So you tell to the API that, okay, this is the model that I should be updating, so that it takes care of the UI as well. And we have the model in the main model. And then the other thing that we need is the actual data. And that goes exactly the same way as it goes in the appending of the model. So let's copy paste that. And now we can remove the functionality of updating the model item. And when we run the application, add a task, yeah, I pressed twice for some reason. You can see the debug that there is a server-side communication ongoing. So we can go to the server side and look at the objects. And there is 3 objects created. And the properties are completed and the title of the task. So if we decide that, okay, we need 1 property more, then we can actually do it like this, that we set, let's think ahead and think that, okay, this will be an application that you can share the to-do items. So if we run the application and add a new task and go to the dashboard, we can see that there's the shared property added as well to the database. And of course, the others don't have the value for that property because it was created after the data was appended. Okay, now we have the storing of the data in the application. Of course, we want to also show the data that is in the server. And of course, we do it in the list model loading when the application starts. And we add Ingenio read, and basically what we need is the model. And now when the application starts, it reads the data from the database. So we have still functionality missing. For example, setting, updating the data, which was done with the model set functionality. So again, the same kind of API as the model. We just give the and then we need actually the index so that it knows what item from the model it should update. So that this is for updating the model, and index is of course available in the model. And then it also needs the ID, which is basically the kind of database ID in the server side. And then it needs the data that needs to be updated. And it toggles the value. So opposite value as it was, because it's Boolean value. And again, let's remove the setting, because the Ingenio API does that. Now we should have the functionality for setting the true false of completed. And as you can see, it was stored in the server. And the final functionality that is missing is the removal of the data. Sorry. And again, we give the model, and then we need to give the index so that it knows what item from the list model it needs to remove. And then we need the ID, which is the database ID in the server side. Is there something wrong? No. And as you can see, the remove functionality is working. And the database is empty in the server side as well. So that was a demonstration how you easily you can create the backend for a QML application with the Ingenio. And the status of the Ingenio, as I stated, we are going to the beta phase quite soon. All the functionality is not there. For example, the file storing functionality is implemented in the server side, but it still needs some testing and the API support for that. And of course, there are some planned functionality, for example, the push notification and WebSocket communication, so that you can actually have a kind of live data access, are missing still, and they are planned to be incrementally included in the functionality. But you can actually already register to the Ingenio. Actually, there's a bug in the address. It's engine.io address. And give your email address so that we can notify when the beta opens up. And in the client API side, as said, the iOS is quite good shape. The Qt stuff still needs a bit of work. And the Qt Creator plugin is basically just a web view integrated, and that launches the dashboard, which is a web-based UI. But actually, that's a kind of, we have been thinking about what's the level of integration to the Qt Creator, and actually, it seems that it works quite nicely, as you can see. You don't have to go to the browser or think about the addresses and stuff like that. But also one thing that we are kind of missing is the real live use cases for the service. So in that sense also we are really interested in having beta testers to the service. So to wrap up, in general, the possibilities for using cloud services from Qt applications is quite good. There are good APIs for the network functionality, and for example the JSON APIs, RESTful APIs usage. You can use the computing facilities to run the Qt applications, do some number crunching, for example. But there is room to improve, and as shown, having these kind of common, easy to use APIs helps in using the cloud services. And as talked this morning in the keynote session, for example, the social connectivity APIs are missing in the Qt itself, but actually there are already implementations for that area as well. And actually there are OAuth implementation existing, but not inside the Qt. And of course, we should be providing more tooling support, more examples, more blog posts, how to set up stuff and get up and running. And I think that one of the key areas that we will be putting focus is the backend as a service. As you can see, the QML being a JavaScript-based language and using the JavaScript object notation, JSON, in the accessing the data from the server is really easy. And also the implementation of the APIs is quite easy. Actually, the Ingenio API that I used doesn't have that much code because it's so easy to manipulate the same objects in the application that are in the API. So there you can see the correct address. So ingenio.io. Please go and register your interest, and we will be sending email when the beta is coming out. Thank you. So if